I'm Marcus.
I'm Ryan.
And together, we are
We're
the Northwest Sports Fanatics. Championship Sunday, man. Two great games just passed. We're going to give you some of our standout players that big-time players make big-time plays in big games, and the big-time players was definitely out. I just want to give you guys a quick recap of Championship Sunday. I want to start with the New England Patriots versus the Denver Broncos.
Classic matchup.
Wow, probably the last time or one of the last times we'll ever see a Peyton Manning versus Tom Brady matchup in the postseason.
Right.
At that. Some of the key offensive players, I'll go over offensive players in that game. Brady, he finished 24 for 38, 277 yards, one touchdown. He didn't really get it going until the third quarter, going into the fourth quarter. Julian Edelman, he continued his fantastic season. He ended the season with 10 receptions on 89 yards. And for the Denver Broncos, Peyton Manning, of course.
Yeah, the legend.
You got an interesting stat on this. Let me say it first. 32 for 43, over 400 yards, 2 touchdowns.
Right, and he's one of only 3 quarterbacks to ever throw for 400 yards in an AFC or NFC championship game, Dan Marino being one of the others. So, very rare company.
Get that man the LeBron sweep. That's what we call it now, the LeBron sweep. Right. Super Bowl MVP, Super Bowl ring.
Right.
Give him a LeBron sweep. I think it's coming.
I think so too.
All right. Another standout offensive player for them was Demaryius Thomas. 7 receptions, 134 yards, 1 touchdown. What about on the defensive side in that game? Name some of the players that stood out for you.
Wow, I think there's some key stats. First, I want to go with the Pats. I think one problem that they had is real glaring stats. 0 sacks on Peyton, 0 interceptions. Right, on Peyton, and 0 forced fumbles on Peyton. It's really hard to beat Peyton Manning if you don't get at least one in those categories. I thought the Aqib Talib injury was obviously a big key with his knee and the ribs. I mean, I think they still would have lost, but it would have been a little bit closer. But some of the names of the players I thought that did pretty well for Denver. Danny Trevathan, Duke Ahinacho, Terrence Knighton, and Robert Ayers. Those 4 players played solid, 17 tackles combined, 2 sacks. I thought they played really well. And man, it was just one of those classic matchups. You were just waiting for Tom Brady to get it going, but then time kind of ran out. Why are some of the reasons you think that New England did not advance besides the 0-0-0 that I mentioned?
Yeah, you're not going to win when you go 0-0-0.
Right.
For me, it was the running game. You know, after the huge game with a rush for over 200 yards, you come back, Vereen, Ridley, and Blunt, 16 attempts for 64 yards. And they had 1 rushing touchdown, and that was from Tom Brady.
Right.
So, obviously, that's not going to get it done there. So, next year, if they get back to the huge game, I think they need to make a more considerable effort to run the ball. And if you see the run is not working, I think they should have opened it up with Brady a little bit sooner. You see, as they open it up, let him get back and make his reads, throw the ball. They start moving the ball and scored a couple of touchdowns.
Right.
Now, what are some of the reasons why the Denver Broncos are playing in the Super Bowl?
Well, Denver Broncos, first you got to go off of Peyton Manning, but more importantly, the offensive line. That, to me, that's the number one reason why you're going to the Super Bowl. 32 for 43, 400 yards. It means you're protecting Peyton in the pocket. He's not getting touched or harassed, by the D linemen and the linebackers. 2 touchdowns, no interceptions. So that's a key stat, not turning the ball over. But one of the keys for me, too, was Knowshon Moreno and Monte Ball combined for 26 carries and 102 yards. They actually hit 100. I didn't think they would do it, and they did. And 24 receptions between Thomas, Decker, and Welker. I thought that was huge. 330 yards receiving, 1 TD. So it shows you where Peyton was throwing the ball to his favorites. But I thought one of the other big keys was the field goal game, which I mentioned in the last video. I thought the field goal game would be huge, and it was. Prater had 4 field goals made, went 4 for 4. And obviously on the other side, you had Gostkowski, only had 1. So there's the big difference in the game. I mean, a couple less field goals, maybe a couple more by New England or a touchdown, and the game could have maybe went a little bit different. Yeah. So what about the San Francisco 49ers and the Seattle Seahawks?
Now, to me, that was the main event.
Right.
That was the main event. So I shout out to Fox for putting that on as the later game.
Right.
Offensive standout players from that game, of course, for San Fran, you go Colin Kaepernick. 14 for 24, 153 yards, 1 touchdown. He threw 2 crucial picks. at the wrong time. He waited till the fourth quarter to throw 2 picks.
Right.
He had 114 yards rushing, so he had a solid day besides the turnovers, and he also had 1 fumble.
Right.
Anquan Bolden was the biggest weapon that day. 5 receptions, 53 yards for 1 touchdown. And for Seattle, I've been on Russell Wilson as far as, it's not going to get it done.
Right.
He played a little bit better. Besides the 1 fumble, he still was. I like to see him get rid of the ball in rhythm. He tries to make plays and scrambles around, but he couldn't do that against that 49er D.
Right.
Doug Baldwin, wow, he still ended up with a good game. 6 reception, 106 yards, and of course, Mr. Beast Mode. Feed that man his Skittles, man.
Right.
22 attempts, 109 yards, and 1 touchdown. Now, what are some standout defensive players from that game for you?
Well, first, to start off with the 49ers, they played a hard game, just came out a little bit short, but Navarro Bowman, everyone saw on TV in that fourth quarter, he's tore his ACL. Sounds like he tore his MCL also, but before that, him and Alden Smith were beasting.
Wow.
I mean, those guys were playing great.
Sure was.
18 tackles combined, 3 sacks, and 2 forced fumbles.
Wow.
I mean, can you really ask 2 other players to do any more? And, man, I just was really disappointed to see him go down with the injury. I don't like to see guys get injured like that. It really kind of was a rude awakening. We had to look away from the TV a few times.
From what I've been hearing, that he was throwing food at him while he was getting carted off the field, man. That's real classless, man. Come on, 12th, man.
Yeah.
That's not. I don't think that represents all of the fans out here in the Northwest. It's always a couple of
a lot of trash talking going on, so things kind of get out of hand sometimes. But I thought for defensively on the Seahawks side, the winners, Bobby Wagner, Cam Chancellor, Malcolm Smith, and 2 guys I mentioned before, Michael Bennett from the Bucks and Cliff Averill from the Lions.
Right.
Huge games, 34 tackles combined, 2 sacks, 2 picks, 2 forced fumbles. I mean, that's why you win the game there with that defense, causing pressure. And another key stat I want to throw out there, the Niners had 1 turnover in 6 games going into that Seattle game. So that's why they were so hot. In the fourth quarter alone, I think they had 3 turnovers. So that really makes it hard to win when you have that many turnovers in the fourth quarter, when you have 1 in 24 quarters and 6 games prior to that. What are some of the reasons why, in your mind, that the Seattle Seahawks won that game, or maybe the Niners lost the game?
Some of the reasons that stood out to me as I look at the stats and watch the tape over and over again. 1, Frank Gore. I said he needed to have a huge game to outrush Beast Mode Marshawn Lynch, and he didn't do it.
Right.
11 carries for 14 yards, 1.3 average.
He said he had a broken hand, and that may be true. He had obviously an injury, but still, you should have been able to maybe run a little bit better.
Maybe get Kendall Hunter, and he had a couple of nice runs. Maybe get him in some plays specifically for him to utilize his skills. But you needed a nice little running game there.
And one thing also too, they didn't run the read option.
They
They could have ran the read option maybe with LaMichael or someone else, and maybe got a few extra yards. And
they ran it the first half. They had a couple of plays off the read option and used Kaepernick scrambling. He ended over 100 yards, but the second half they kind of went away from it, and it was kind of I gave this analogy earlier as far as your point guard comes out and he's looking to score, and not getting his team involved,
right? And
then when it's time to get his team involved, they're cold, and they're like
no
rhythm. That's what kind of that game was. Their rhythm was all off because of Kaepernick running the ball so much.
Right.
I figured they should have just kept feeding them. I mean, they didn't stop it. Right. So why not keep feeding them? And also, Vernon Davis, 2 receptions, 16 yards. You're going to need more than that from one of the top tight ends and one of your best weapons that you have on your offensive side of the ball. Another key stat for me was 3 turnovers to 1. And that always spells in an L for you.
Right.
Now, what are some of the reasons that Seattle is going to take on the Denver Broncos in the Super Bowl?
I think, obviously, first you got to say their O-line and Russell Wilson. They came to play. You had the 1 touchdown where Russell, they went off sides. They had a free play, threw it downfield, got a touchdown, I think, to Curse.
Yep.
And that was huge because he didn't really have a whole lot of rhythm up to that point, but getting that touchdown really sparked him. Obviously, Marshawn Lynch with his beast mode run, incredible. One of the most exciting runs I've seen all season. And obviously Doug Baldwin, like you mentioned, he did special teams, running kicks back and catching the ball. 6 catches for him, very solid. But I thought one of the key players was the kickers. The kickers are always involved. It's not something
they're overlooked.
They're always overlooked. Nobody wants to talk about them,
Right.
but they always come into play. Hauschka went 3 for 3. Dawson went for 1 for 1. And if you think about it, 3 points doesn't seem like a lot, but when the game ends up being 23-17,
Yeah.
that sometimes ends up being the difference between winning and losing. So that's pretty much what I think. But when we're moving forward now, we got the
Time Super Bowl.
Super Bowl, Denver Broncos, Seattle Seahawks.
Right around the corner, man. And that's our recap of Championship Sunday. So y'all stay tuned. We'll be back at you to hit you with our Super Bowl preview.
Absolutely. Next week, we'll have a nice little Super Bowl preview. Stay tuned. NBA videos. We're going to have that as well for you. Northwest Sports Fanatics.
Hey, I got another sweatshirt on.